Hey friends, tonight I'm sharing the story of an unlikely criminal empire that defined a generation. The RICO case that brought down Sesame Street, a tale of cookie cartels, a birdseed empire, and rubber ducks that might have flipped. If slow burn crime stories help you drift off, hit like, tap subscribe, and drop a comment telling us when and where you're tuning in. We're watching the street around the clock. Now settle in and let Detective Jason Ratham, me, walk you through the softest takedown in criminal history. Chapter 1. The Interrogation Room. You ever try to fall asleep in an interrogation room? Because I have. Too many times to count, and not just from the boredom, but from the sheer weight of what you know. Sitting there in that dim light, the hum of a cheap fluorescent buzzing like a lie detector's conscience, and the smell of burnt coffee that's seen more crimes than a Netflix documentary. That's where I am right now. Not physically, nah. I'm in a robe, whispering this into a mic softer than a baby's conscience. But spiritually, I'm back in that room. The one where the whole case began. The one that smelled like crayons, cookies, and conspiracy. This was the night we opened the file. The night I realized I was about to take down the biggest organized crime syndicate in educational television history, Sesame Street. It was supposed to be a neighborhood for learning, for laughter, for love. But behind the sunny days and friendly waves, behind the puppets and the parables, there was something darker, something sticky. Not jam, not glue, not even Grover's elbow after a milkshake accident. No, this was the kind of sticky that doesn't wash off. Sticky like RICO charges and racketeering. Sticky like laundering cookie money through non-profit bake sales. Sticky like a duck with a wiretap. I was assigned the case after an anonymous tip came in. No voice, no name, just a sound file. It was a recording of someone humming the alphabet, backwards, chilling. And at the end, a whisper. They're not teaching letters, they're running numbers. Click. End of message. At first I thought it was a prank. But when I ran it through audio analysis, ran it past the Bureau's Puppet Crimes Division, everything changed. The pitch, the breath pattern, the slight rasp on the Z matched one known individual. One suspect we'd had our eye on for years, but never had the guts or bedtime clearance to pursue. The Count. Now let me explain something about the Count. This wasn't your grandma's vampire. This wasn't some Halloween decoration with a calculator. No, the Count had run underground gambling rings from Brooklyn to Budapest. Census fraud, tax evasion, crypto coin fraud based on imaginary numbers. This guy didn't just count. He owned the numbers. And he was just one piece of it. See, what the public didn't know, what the cameras never showed, was that Sesame Street had gone rogue. What started as an educational outreach turned into an empire. Cookies were the currency. Feathers were the calling card. Rubber ducks were encrypted burner phones. And behind it all, behind the felt and fluff, was something worse than criminal. It was organized. I opened the case file. It was thick. Too thick for puppets. Inside, surveillance photos. Crumbs leading from an elementary school into a van marked Free Math Help. A shipping manifest listing £200 of organic birdseed addressed to a theatre company in Detroit. A blurry photo of a trash can meeting with a limousine. And worst of all, a napkin. Scrawled in red crayon, a list of names. Code names, alphabetized, crossed out in patterns that didn't make sense. Unless you knew your ABCs like I did. They assigned me a team. Technically, but I worked alone. Just me and my thoughts, which coincidentally also needed therapy. I'd been through a lot of cases, from the Great Play-Doh poisoning of '97 to the Puppet Union embezzlement scandal of 2003. But nothing prepared me for this. The stakes were too high, the suspects too fuzzy, and the rules thrown out with Oscar's recycling. There were 6 main targets, each with their own file, each more troubling than the last. Let me tell you what I knew going in. First, Cookie Monster. He'd been on the Bureau's radar since the Great Biscotti heist. But this wasn't just about snacks anymore. This was an international cookie cartel. Baked goods moved in school lunchboxes, hidden in holiday gift baskets, traded for test answers and PTA favors. He had 3 aliases, 12 dummy LLCs, and a network of blue-furred couriers that stretched from Kansas to Kabul. Second, the Count. We covered him. But did I mention the Ponzi scheme involving imaginary friends and imaginary dividends? Yeah. Turns out counting isn't just a habit, it's a business model. Third, Big Bird. Too big, too visible. But that's what made it brilliant. No one suspects the tall guy with the sunny smile and a beak full of lies. Birdseed smuggling, park extortion, monopoly on playground swings. You name it, he chirped over it. Fourth, Bert. Quiet, buttoned up. But don't let the eyebrows fool you. This guy handled the books, kept the ledgers clean, operated through pigeons, literal carrier pigeons, outfitted with tiny ledgers and microchips sewn into their seed bags. He was the cleanest dirty bookkeeper I'd ever seen. Fifth, Ernie. Too loud to be innocent, too bubbly to be legal. He ran bath toy trafficking out of 5 boroughs, used rubber ducks as message carriers, had code embedded in bubble bath foam. Somewhere between laughter and lather, Ernie built an empire. And last, Elmo, the enforcer. Smiled too much, hugged too tight, and never said anything without rhyme, which made testimony impossible. But still, witnesses described him as charismatic, disturbing, and redder than expected. And now, it was up to me. to gather the evidence, connect the dots, untangle the yarn, and deliver the softest, most whispered takedown in crime history. I closed the file and looked out at the quiet city. It was late. Too late for this kind of nonsense. But justice doesn't sleep. It naps. And tonight, it was almost nap time. The first name on my list, Cookie Monster. Chapter 2, Cookie Monster's Crumbs. The first time I laid eyes on Cookie Monster's file, I knew I'd need a snack to get through it. Thick manila folder, smelled like powdered sugar and bad decisions. Inside, surveillance photos dusted with flower prints, receipts for suspicious bakery donations, and a shipping manifesto that listed 12 crates of artisanal biscotti flagged by customs in Newark. And then scrawled across the bottom in red Sharpie, "Do not approach while hungry." They said Cookie Monster was a one-note clown. A loud, blue, fuzzy guy with a cookie addiction and a vocabulary of 4 words. But I knew better. Underneath that googly-eyed facade, he was running a multi-state baked goods cartel that stretched from school lunchrooms to retirement homes. He wasn't addicted to cookies. He was addicted to power. And crumbs were just his calling card. We started our investigation at a suspicious non-profit called the Crumbunity Center, a place where kids were supposed to learn about food safety and cookie awareness. But no one was learning anything, because the entire facility smelled like a bakery exploded during a math test. Kids were coming out wired on sugar, claiming they'd solved algebra equations using frosting. The teachers were in a daze, and the janitor, he was just sweeping the same pile of sprinkles in circles. I questioned the director, a shaky guy in a beige sweater who kept licking his fingers every time he turned a page in his clipboard. He said Cookie Monster only popped in now and then for charity readings. Said he brought his own cookies from home. Said they were gluten-free and made with love. I asked him if he had a permit for the back kitchen. He blinked twice, then ran. We kicked the door in. Inside was a full-blown bakery operation. Industrial mixers, vacuum-sealed cookie bags, jars of chocolate chips labeled by country of origin. There was a spreadsheet on the wall mapping cookie sales to zip codes, and taped above it a photo of Cookie Monster with a gold chain and a chef's hat, holding a tray of snickerdoodles like Scarface in an apron. Caption read, "Say hello to my little crumbs." We confiscated it all, every crumb, every bag of biscotti, every suspicious-looking oatmeal round that may or may not have been a bribe. And just when we thought we had it all, we found a hidden drawer beneath the cookie racks. Inside, invoices, hundreds of them. Cookie deliveries to local police departments. Discounted cupcakes for judges. Scones delivered with a wink to city council meetings. The man wasn't selling sweets. He was buying protection. So I did what any good detective would do. I went undercover. I signed up for one of Cookie Monster's Baking for Peace workshops. They gave me a hairnet, a whisk, and a laminated name tag that said Chippy. I nearly blew my cover 3 minutes in when I added salt instead of sugar. But I told them it was a new trend called savory compassion. They bought it. Suckers. And that's when I saw him, the big guy himself, Cookie Monster. He shuffled in through the back, wearing a velvet robe and a ring shaped like a ginger snap. He didn't talk, just sniffed the air like a bloodhound at a bake sale. Then, with one giant fuzzy hand, he reached into a tray of still warm cookies and took one bite. The room fell silent. Even the stand mixer stopped spinning. Then he nodded, once, and mumbled, "Me. Approve." Everyone clapped like we just cured world hunger with molasses. That night, I tailed him. He moved fast for a guy shaped like a throw pillow with legs. Hopped into a nondescript van labeled Snacks for Seniors. We followed at a distance. He made 5 stops, schools, nursing homes, even a dentist's office, dropping off brown bags labeled confidential crumbs. But the real twist came at the last stop. A warehouse near the docks. No sign, no windows, just the soft sound of jazz and the faint scent of lemon bars. I watched as he unloaded boxes, marked donations, into the back, then emerged with a briefcase, metal, locked, guarded by a woman in a Cookie Crisp costume who looked like she did her cardio in powdered sugar. This wasn't a delivery, it was an exchange. The cookies weren't the product, they were the currency. Back at HQ, we cracked the briefcase. Inside were lists, names of bakeries, street-level distributors, even school administrators. All of them marked with flavor codes. Chocolate chip meant loyal. Macadamia nut meant watching. Raisin meant remove. I stared at the list. Half the city's sweet tooths were on payroll, and some weren't even aware. It was a soft empire, built on dough, maintained by fear and frosting. Cookie Monster wasn't just running a cartel. He'd created an economy, a cookie-based shadow currency fueling puppet politics. And the worst part? Nobody wanted to believe it. To the public, he was still the goofy guy yelling, "Om nom nom," and chewing scenery like a toddler in a bakery. But to me, he was a kingpin with sprinkles. We needed to act. I filed the first motion under the Puppet Organized Crime Initiative. We called it Operation Crumb Catcher, and that's when the threat started. A box of stale cookies on my desk, a trail of crumbs leading to my car. A single fortune cookie slipped under my door that read, "Don't bite the hand that feeds, unless you want crumbs forever." I couldn't prove it was him. Not yet. But I knew he was watching, and if we were going to bring down this monster, we'd have to follow the trail to the next player, the one who controlled the odds, who moved the money, who made math terrifying. The Count. Chapter 3. The Count's Numbers Game. The Count had always made people nervous, but not for the reasons you'd expect. It wasn't the accent. It wasn't the cape. It wasn't even the unsettling way he laughed after every sentence, like he was trying to hypnotize your tax return. What made people nervous was this. The Count never made a mistake, not once, not in 50 years. He counted everything, breaths, beans, subpoenas, and he always got it right, which meant if he was hiding something, it wasn't by accident. I first learned about his side hustle from a retired census worker who had started twitching every time she heard a bell toll. She said her final assignment was just a simple neighborhood in Brooklyn, Sesame Street. She went in with a clipboard and left with trauma. Said every door she knocked on was answered by the same guy. Fangs, monocle, monocultural vibes. She counted the Count 8 different times. Each time he insisted he was someone else entirely. Once he even wore a fake mustache over his real mustache. She filed a complaint. It got buried beneath a pile of puppet census forms that all listed number of household members as 1. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a numbers game. This was identity laundering, and the Count was hiding more than his reflection. I started digging into his financials, what little there were. Everything was precise, too precise. All expenses were rounded to the nearest cent. Receipts were time-stamped down to the millisecond. Even his monthly blood orange juice deliveries were listed in Roman numerals. But the real trail started when I noticed something strange. A payment, exactly $6.66, showing up every Thursday, to a shell company called Count Coin Holdings LLC. The address, a basement storage unit beneath a puppet theater, which, by the way, is the sketchiest sentence I've ever said. I paid the place a visit. Basement smelled like velvet and betrayal. Inside, dozens of little counting machines, some for money, some for marbles. One was literally counting how many times I blinked. In the back, I found what I came for. A chalkboard, covered in numbers, betting odds, and a list of names. Each name matched a puppet. Next to each name, dollar signs and strange symbols. It wasn't English. It wasn't math. It was statistical prophecy. Turns out, the Count had started a side hustle, underground numerology-based gambling. He'd predict when someone would sneeze, stub a toe, or lose a sock, then take bets on the outcome. They weren't just playing with numbers, they were playing with fate. The more I dug, the deeper it got. The Count had been manipulating lotteries, rigging birthday raffles, even inserting false stats into academic research papers. One university thought socks were disappearing at a rate of 3 per week. It was really just 2, but he fudged the math because the line on Odd Sock Thursday was paying double. I visited one of his alleged front businesses, a storefront called Count's Academy of Advanced Arithmetic and Slightly Illegal Probability. It was listed as a mathematical enrichment center. I walked in. The room was dim, full of velvet curtains, and lit by a chandelier shaped like an abacus. Kids sat at desks, rolling dice and whispering about Fibonacci sequences like they were secrets. On the wall, a poster read, "Learn to count or count your losses." I spoke to the receptionist, a puppet with a visor and a cigar. He said the count was in session, said I could wait, so I did. 23 minutes and 11 seconds later, not that I was counting, the count emerged. He looked exactly like you remember him. Purple skin, sharp teeth, eyes that glowed like a slot machine at midnight. He greeted me with a bow and a grin. Ah, one detective. Ah. Then he laughed. Once. Exactly once. Creepy. I asked him if he knew anything about the gambling operation. He adjusted his cape. No, he said. I merely count what others wager. I asked him if he profited. I merely take a small commission. I asked him if he manipulated outcomes. He paused, and for the first time didn't laugh, then softly muttered, dash. I prefer the numbers to win. He offered me tea. I declined. He offered me odds on whether I'd regret declining. I left, fast. Back at the precinct, I ran his data through our financial forensics algorithm. It crashed. Apparently, he'd encrypted his transactions using the Fibonacci spiral dash, and every time we tried to decode it, the numbers multiplied. Self-replicating accounting. It was genius. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. I knew we had to act. We couldn't prove he was fixing outcomes, but we could tie him to the money flow. So we subpoenaed his velvet curtain manufacturer. Turns out he was paying for drapes in untraceable math tokens, a made-up currency called Num Coin. The IRS had no record of it, because the IRS didn't know how to divide by imaginary numbers. We filed our findings under Operation Countdown, but just before we made the arrest, he vanished, left a single sticky note on his front door. It read, "I am number gone." We lost him, at least for now, but the ripple effects remained. His network was still in play, and one of his most frequent financial collaborators, a 6-foot-tall bird with bright feathers and deeper pockets than the Federal Reserve, which meant the next stop was Big Bird. Chapter 4. Big Bird's Turf War. The thing about Big Bird is, he never blinked. I don't mean that metaphorically, I mean medically. His eyes were wide, always, that endless, unblinking stare, like a surveillance camera made of sunshine and avian menace. To the public, he was the sweetheart of the street. To me, he was a walking lie in yellow feathers. After the Count disappeared, we followed the money trail straight into birdseed. Thousands of pounds of it, unregulated, untaxed, all marked for educational purposes. And yet, none of it ever made it to the classrooms. Not unless classrooms now meant rooftop gardens and suspiciously well-fed pigeons near municipal buildings. The invoices led to a shell operation called Feathers of Hope, a charity, allegedly, claimed to support emotional enrichment through avian-based storytelling. It sounded like something cooked up in a PR focus group locked in a sauna. But the numbers didn't lie. Feathers of Hope had received over $2.6 million in grants over 3 years. Where did it go? Birdseed. Straight to a warehouse registered under a dummy company called Nesting Assets, LLC. And who ran that warehouse? Big Bird. Now, Big Bird didn't hide like the others. He was out in public all the time, singing, dancing, spinning in slow circles on his massive feet like a sesame-sized ballerina. But that was part of the game. You see someone that visible, you stop asking questions. You think, that guy can't be dangerous. He's literally singing about clouds. But every time he sang, something shifted. A vendor got pushed off a corner. A new bench appeared in the park. The pigeons started avoiding eye contact. We sent in drones. Tiny surveillance drones disguised as bees. They buzzed around the birdseed warehouse for 3 days before one went offline. When we recovered it, the footage had been wiped and replaced with a music video. Big Bird, lip-syncing to Sympathy for the Devil, surrounded by backup dancers in pigeon masks. This wasn't a turf operation. It was psychological warfare. So I visited the warehouse, disguised as an urban garden inspector. They handed me a clipboard, a little neon vest, and a juice box. Inside, pallets of birdseed stacked floor to ceiling, exotic labels, imported blends, high-end packaging with names like Kucha Crumble and Golden Millet Supreme. In the back, I found something worse. Maps of the entire city, sectioned off into territories, each labeled with a feather color: red, blue, green, silver, with Big Bird's section marked in gold, and his territory. Every single public park, every swing set, every sidewalk chalk zone. He didn't just control the seed, he controlled childhood real estate. I confronted him the next day. He was at a school, spinning a ribbon on a stick, giggling with second graders. I waited until recess ended, then approached. "Detective Dave Rappel," I said. "Mind if I ask you a few questions?" He smiled, too wide, then tilted his head. "Of course, officer. I love questions." He said it like a cartoon chef offering poisoned cupcakes. I asked about the warehouse. He nodded enthusiastically. Oh yes, the Hope Nest. It's where we nurture positivity through seed-based learning. I asked about the maps. He blinked for the first time, then leaned in close. You have to keep the street organized, detective. Otherwise the pigeons get rebellious. Then he spun his ribbon again. Too slow, too deliberate. I left before I said something regrettable. Because deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't just turf control. Big Bird was a landlord, and he was using public parks to run a protection racket. Vendors who didn't pay his kindness fees found their hot dog buns mysteriously swarmed with seed. Musicians who refused his terms had their xylophones knocked over mid-chorus by accidental twirls, and the chalk artists erased by rogue sprinklers, bird-controlled sprinklers. Back at HQ, I pulled the records, property maintenance reports, park repair logs. Turns out Big Bird's non-profit had contracts with the city's parks department. He was leasing benches back to the city, charging feather cleaning fees, sending invoices for emotional resonance maintenance. The man was charging rent on laughter zones, but it didn't stop there. Every Saturday, the Bird ran a street concert. He called it the Joy Jam. Kids would dance. Parents would take photos. Meanwhile, behind the stage, his crew would meet with vendors. Cash changed hands. Feather samples were taken. Dossiers updated. We sent in Agent Vega, deep cover, disguised as a balloon animal vendor. She lasted 15 minutes before the pigeons started circling. She said one of them had a tiny earpiece. Another wore sunglasses. A third had a clipboard. She made it out, barely. But she brought back proof. A napkin, smeared with mustard. And on the back, a list of parks. Next to each one, a dollar amount. Next to the dollar amount, a phrase, whistle friendly or needs fluffing. That was it. Big Bird wasn't just the face of the street. He was the Don, friendly, fluffy, and feather deep in racketeering. We launched Operation Yellow Flag, raided the warehouse, shut down the seed supply, seized the Joy Jam sound system. But when we showed up at his nest, he was gone. All that was left, a single feather, gold-tipped, and a cassette tape labeled, "See you next spring." Another one gone. Another whisper on the wind. But the street was shifting. Too many operations. Too much coordination. This wasn't just a puppet crime ring. This was a syndicate. And the next name on the list. A quiet one. Reserved. Repressed. Eyebrows sharp enough to cut glass. The bookkeeper of the whole operation. Bird, Chapter 5. Bert's Pigeon Ledger. Bert was the kind of suspect you almost didn't want to arrest. Not because he was innocent, far from it, but because everything about him screamed harmless. The guy wore oatmeal-colored turtlenecks unironically. He collected paper clips for fun. His favorite hobby was organizing bottle caps by era. He had the vibe of someone who'd apologize for bumping into a chair and then tip it $5 for its trouble. But looks can be deceiving. And in Bert's case, they were downright dangerous. It started with pigeons. Not in the poetic feathered symbol of peace kind of way. I mean real, living, slightly judgmental pigeons. A flock of them kept showing up outside the courthouse, perched perfectly along the ledge like they were casing the place. Always the same number, 7. Always the same formation, V shape facing due east. It wasn't random, it was reconnaissance. One morning, a bailiff stepped outside to grab a coffee and found a pigeon staring him down, with what appeared to be a microfilm reel taped under its wing. We ran the film. It showed financial records, wire transfers, dummy accounts, tax shelters in the Cayman Islands, the kind of stuff that doesn't belong in a bird's briefcase. We traced the footage back to its source. Every transfer led to the same address, a modest brownstone just off Sesame Street, and the name on the lease, Bert. When we brought him in, he looked more confused than guilty. His first question wasn't, "What's this about?" It was, "Can I feed the pigeons while I'm here?" Red flag number 1. He sat in the interrogation room like it was a doctor's office. Legs crossed, hands folded, eyes darting toward the window every 30 seconds, like he was waiting for someone or something. We started simple. "Bert, do you know anything about offshore accounts?" "No," he said, tilting his head. "Is that like when you buy socks on vacation?" I wanted to believe him. But then I opened the folder. Inside, ledgers. Pages and pages of them. Handwritten in the tightest script I've ever seen. Neatly labeled, color-coded, pigeon stamped. Literal stamps of pigeons to mark secure transactions. He wasn't just tracking finances. He was creating an entire avian accounting system. It got weirder. Each pigeon had a name. Not like Fluffy or Claus. I'm talking full aliases. Charles Beekman, Mildred Quill, Agent Featherton. And next to each alias, delivery routes, client ledgers, tax ID numbers. One pigeon had apparently been filing quarterly earnings since 2016. When I confronted Bert with the documents, he sighed. "I didn't want it to get out of hand," he said softly. "It just grew." That's how we learned about the coop. Not a chicken farm, not a bar. The coop was Bert's underground financial syndicate. A fully functional accounting and laundering operation run through homing pigeons. The system was brilliant. Transactions were hand-delivered by birds, avoiding all digital traceability. Each pigeon was trained to recognize specific building rooftops, and the messages were encoded in what Bert called pigeon decimal. It was a base 17 numerical cipher that could only be decrypted if you also knew the recipient's favorite oatmeal brand. No, I'm not making that up. His clients. That's the part that chilled me. Other puppets, street performers, even municipal employees. Bert wasn't stealing from the system. He was the system. Quiet, tidy, boring, Bert had built an empire of clean books and dirtier secrets. He didn't sell crime. He processed it, legitimized it, made it look friendly. He was the guy the other crooks trusted because he never missed a decimal and never talked too loud. And he never charged more than 2.5%. We seized his brownstone. Inside we found rows of miniature pigeon cubbies, each with a nameplate and a tiny velvet curtain. They had a break room with birdseed dispensers and a motivational poster that said, "You don't rise, you roost." There were other clues too. One drawer was full of disguises for pigeons, little hats, tiny glasses, even fake beaks. He'd been running decoy birds through the same routes to throw off drone surveillance. Bert was laundering information with birds in wigs. The hardest part, he never got rich. Bert's own bank account had less than $500 in it. He lived modestly, ate plain toast, and invested in antique sock puppets. He wasn't in it for the money. He was in it for the order, for the balance, for the spreadsheet. When I asked him why, he said, "Chaos makes me itchy." We didn't know what to do with him. He hadn't technically broken any laws. Not yet. He hadn't stolen anything. Just moved it. Silently, systematically, and always with receipts. But then came the real twist. As we boxed up his belongings, one of the younger officers accidentally opened a sealed container labeled "Do Not Inventory." Inside were more ledgers, not for clients, but for associates. That's where we found them. Names, codes, cross-references. One particularly thick file labeled Ernest caught my eye. It detailed shipments of rubber ducks, unusual quantities, shipping patterns that mirrored the routes of Bert's pigeons, which meant Bert wasn't just running numbers. He was also running logistics for Ernie, his old roommate, his best friend, his co-conspirator. The Ernie file was over 2 inches thick. It included barcodes, bath toy specs, international shipping permits, and a whole section on squeak density optimization. It wasn't just a ledger, it was a manifesto. And Bert had signed the last page. For Ernest in Ducks and Trust. Bert. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a one-off. This was infrastructure. Bert was the backbone of the whole thing. The handler, the paper trail, the guy who knew where everything went and how to make sure no one noticed. He wasn't flamboyant. He wasn't scary. He was worse. He was efficient. By the end of the day, we couldn't pin a single crime on him. No fingerprints, no direct involvement, no stolen goods, just birds. So many birds. We let him go. But as he walked out of the station, clutching a box of alphabetized seed packets, a pigeon landed on his shoulder. It looked me straight in the eye, then winked. Bert whispered something into its ear, and it flew off. I stood there in silence, holding a file I couldn't close, a spreadsheet I couldn't understand, and a gut feeling that something bigger, much bigger, was still flapping just out of reach. Next on the list, a squeaky little man with a suspiciously bubbly laugh, and a bath toy empire that spanned 3 continents. It was time to talk to Ernie. Chapter 6. Ernie's Rubber Empire. If Bert was the quiet accountant of Sesame Street, Ernie was its manic frontman. Where Bert organized, Ernie improvised. Where Bert filed, Ernie freestyled. And where Bert operated in hushed tones and double-entry bookkeeping, Ernie practically tap-danced through federal violations while humming to himself and playing a ukulele. I first got wind of his racket when Homeland Security flagged a container ship arriving in Long Beach. The manifest said, "Educational toys." It was rubber ducks, thousands of them, all identical, all smiling, all squeaking in F sharp. Now, ducks aren't illegal, not unless they bite. But when you find 36,000 units of a toy, usually sold in packs of one, you start asking questions, especially when the ducks have microchips embedded in their beaks. We ran a few through analysis. They weren't toys. They were carriers, data nodes. Each duck had 64 gigs of encrypted information stored in the Quack protocol. That's not a joke. The encryption key was literally a series of tonal squeaks. Who designs a musical security system? Ernie, that's who. So I paid him a visit. His place was exactly what you'd expect. A converted fire hydrant warehouse full of bubbles, disco lights, and a tub the size of a sedan. He greeted me wearing a robe made of terry cloth and audacity, sipping something fizzy through a bendy straw shaped like a flamingo. He said, "Detective Rappel, you came for bath time." I said, "I came for answers." He offered me a duck. I declined. He offered me 2 ducks. I still declined. Then he offered me a job. Said he was looking for a guy who understood both soap and surveillance. That's when I knew this wasn't just some squeaky side hustle. Ernie was building something. A network. A fully operational rubber-based information exchange hidden beneath a veneer of bubble baths and childlike wonder. His ducks were being shipped to embassies, to private schools, to retirement communities, anywhere people like to soak and be distracted. And what were they carrying? That's the part that chilled me. Everything. Tax documents, offshore account information, surveillance footage, even a full season of a banned puppet reality show called Real Housewives of Felt County. He wasn't just moving data. He was curating it, filtering it, selling it. We tried to trace the shipments. They were routed through Ernie's bath supply business, Soap Opera Solutions. On paper, it looked legit. He sold bubble bath concentrate, loofah subscriptions, and a patented line of waterproof, sarcasm-proof diaries. But then we found the second ledger. Not digital, not even typed, handwritten in crayon. And not just any crayon, custom colors. Names like Duckshed Grey, Bubble Blue, and Regret. Each page listed clients by code name. The lifeguard, Mr. Soak, Captain Conditioner. And next to each name, quantities, shipment dates, and one cryptic phrase, "Squeak confirmed." Turns out that was Ernie's way of marking a successful transaction. We seized one of his warehouses. Inside more ducks, rubber decoys, inflatable interns, and a full production line run by puppets in hairnets. They moved like clockwork, 1 duck every 3 seconds, each squeak calibrated, each bill dusted with what appeared to be lemon-scented encryption. In the corner, we found a whiteboard. On it, QuackNet Phase 4. Bullet points included aquatic drone delivery, soap bar cryptocurrency, underwater TED Talks. I confronted Ernie again. He just smiled, said, "The world is messy, detective. I'm just helping it squeak by." He offered me a towel. I declined. He offered me an alibi. I asked if it squeaked. He winked. The trouble with Ernie was he never operated alone. Bert handled logistics. Big Bird moved seed money. And Oscar, he handled disposal. Ernie was the linchpin, the charismatic distraction, the guy who made money laundering look like arts and crafts. But he never left fingerprints, only bubbles. So we changed tactics. We followed the bubbles. Literally. Each duck left a faint trail of scented glycerin that, when viewed under ultraviolet light, spelled out short phrases. It was an analog blockchain. Transactions recorded in bath residue. I couldn't make this up if I tried. And it worked. We traced one trail to a boutique hotel in the Catskills. Room 407. Inside, we found a puppet mid-soak with a duck pressed to its ear, whispering. He claimed he was just listening to squeaky ASMR. We seized the duck, decoded the audio. Ernie himself, reading financial data aloud between rhyming couplets. Offshore, onshore, Cayman delight, transfer the funds before Friday night. He was laundering data through bedtime poems. I knew then he had to be stopped. We raided his bathhouse headquarters. Inside, chaos, puppets running, ducks flying. Someone threw a loofah grenade. In the center of the room, Ernie, seated on a porcelain throne, rubber duck in each hand like twin pistols. He saw me, stood up, smiled, said, "Detective, time to take the plunge." Then pulled a lever. The floor beneath him turned into a slide. He vanished, down a chute, into God knows where. We searched for hours, found a tunnel system under the city's waterworks. It smelled like citrus and betrayal. He was gone, but not silent. Later that night, my phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number, just a photo of a duck wearing sunglasses, with the caption, "You'll never catch me clean." I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it and drew a bath, just to see if the faucet whispered. Next up was Oscar, because behind every empire, every duck, every squeak, every ridiculous pun, was someone cleaning up the mess. And no one lived for garbage like the Grouch. Chapter 7. Oscar the Grouch, the dumpster don. There are certain smells you don't forget. Oscar smelled like all of them. Burnt coffee, moldy gym sock, a banana peel that lost a knife fight in July. You get used to it after a while, but it never truly leaves you, just lingers, like a bad mood with a passport. I first met Oscar when he was flipping off a recycling inspector from inside his trash can. Said the man was trying to gentrify his rot. That was the day I started keeping a separate notebook labeled Grouch Affairs. I never thought I'd need it. Turns out, I needed an entire cabinet. Oscar ran the most efficient criminal syndicate on Sesame Street. His specialty, waste-based enterprise, the art of turning trash into treasure. And not in the Pinterest way. I'm talking real revenue, black market compost sales, backdoor landfill zoning, under-the-table sanitation bribes. The man was a garbage genius. He'd broker deals with junkyard dogs, host bidding wars over discarded mattresses, and once cornered the entire market on expired yogurt for reasons I still don't understand. But it wasn't just about trash. Oscar controlled the infrastructure of inconvenience. He knew when garbage trucks rolled by, knew which alley cats took bribes, knew how to make a phone call from a banana phone no one else could hear. I started paying closer attention when our intel flagged a network of sanitation workers who were laundering puppet money through municipal contracts. Guess who ran the paper trail? Oscar the Grouch. He'd created a shell organization called RICO. Officially, it was a waste management consulting firm. Unofficially, it was the nerve center for an empire of filth. Every move on the street, every shady deal, every missing puppet, every strangely heavy trash bag, it all circled back to his lid. We tried to audit him. He bit the auditor. We sent a second auditor. He got lost in a pile of 1990s cereal boxes and had to be airlifted out. That's when I knew I had to go in myself. Now, visiting Oscar isn't like a standard interview. You don't knock, you rattle the lid, and then you wait. Sometimes he answers. Sometimes you get a boot. This time, he answered. Grumbling, of course. His eyebrow rose like a drawbridge of disdain. Back again, Detective Rappel. You looking to join my compost loyalty program? Not today, I said. Just need to know how your name ended up on a series of sanitation grants meant for eco charities. Oh, he said. That? Then he belched, loud enough to shake a nearby mailbox. Look, he continued, I believe in giving back, especially if it's stuff people already threw away. I asked him about the offshore compost farms in Guam. He shrugged. I asked him about the landfill NFTs. He cackled. Turns out, Oscar had tokenized his trash, created limited edition digital banana peels, each linked to a real one in a vault somewhere under Detroit. He was selling them to rich collectors as organic investments. Art is subjective, he said, smirking, and so is rot. He had partners, other grouches, a whole network of them, all operating under aliases like Sludge, Cranky, and Jeff. Jeff was the scariest, always humming. They communicated through coded messages disguised as angry Yelp reviews. One review for a laundromat read, "Too clean, zero crust, would not smear again." Translation: shipment received. They had encryption. They had protocols. They had a loyalty card that smelled like beef stew. And at the center, Oscar. The Don, he wasn't just running garbage. He was running secrets, hiding files in old pizza boxes, using aluminum cans as data vaults. Once, he even stored a flash drive in a pile of nacho cheese. The cheese still worked. We tried to track his finances. Couldn't. Every transaction was listed as Grumble Coin, a cryptocurrency only tradable on a platform called Stenchex. We raided a local dump, hoping to find a ledger. We found a note taped to a raccoon. It read, "Nice try." Oscar was always 3 steps ahead. Even his allies didn't know the full operation. He kept things compartmentalized, and I mean that literally. He operated out of a system of labeled trash bins. One for plastics, one for bribes, one for puppet secrets. I asked him once why he did it. He looked up from a plate of sardines and glitter. Because everyone underestimates trash. And maybe he had a point. Society discards what it doesn't want to see. Oscar collected it, cherished it, sold it to the highest bidder. There was a poetry to his grime, but also a danger. Because when trash builds up, so do consequences. And Oscar had enough dirt, literal and metaphorical, to collapse the whole street. We built a case, tied together the grants, the NFTs, the stinky loyalty cards. We even subpoenaed his beef stew loyalty program, which, yes, was real. He showed up to court in a tuxedo made of duct tape and disdain, brought a banana peel as his lawyer. The judge asked, "Do you understand the charges?" Oscar replied, "Do you understand the value of vintage sandwich crusts?" It was chaos, but we had him until he flipped the switch, literally, pulled a lever from inside his can. Suddenly, half the courtroom chairs folded into themselves. Bailiff fell through a trap door. The stenographer floated away on what appeared to be a helium-filled burrito wrapper. Oscar had rigged the court. We found him 3 hours later in a neighboring borough, disguised as a compost instructor named Cheryl. He almost got away, but I smelled the beef stew. That was always his tell. We brought him in, charged him with conspiracy to traffic waste-based assets, obstruction of hygiene, and illegal possession of a raccoon with an attitude. He grumbled through the entire booking, asked if the holding cell had a recycling program, then tried to bribe me with a vintage Band-Aid and a bottle cap. I declined. He winked. We knew he wouldn't stay long. Not Oscar. He had allies, tunnels, trash-based escape plans. But we bought ourselves time. Time to trace his connections. Time to sniff out the deeper rot. Because for all his filth, Oscar was clean compared to what came next. Grover. Super Grover. And as it turns out, the least reliable getaway driver in puppet history. Chapter 8. Grover. Flight Risk. The first time I saw Super Grover fly, he knocked over a produce stand and concussed a mailman. The second time, he tried to arrest a street lamp for evil glowing. By the third time, we stopped calling it flight. Started calling it what it was. Puppet endangerment. Grover had heart, no question. Big heart, bigger helmet. Zero sense of direction. If Sesame Street ever had a wild card, it was him. So when a string of international puppet smuggling operations all trace back to jet-fueled footprints and bits of Cape lint, I knew exactly who to call, or rather, who to chase. Super Grover wasn't your average crook. He wasn't greedy. He wasn't even organized. But he had something far more dangerous. Good intentions combined with bad execution. A witness said he saw Grover in a back alley, handing a duffel bag to a sock puppet with an accent. Another spotted him launching off a rooftop in Prague, shouting something about the mission. Interpol flagged him. Twice. Once for airspace violations. Once for confusing a Dutch windmill with a villainous robot. I caught up with him in an airport hangar outside Hoboken. He was stuffing plush toys into a crate labeled super secret supplies, definitely not illicit. "Grover," I called out, "we need to talk." He spun around, helmet askew, goggles fogged. "Detective Rappel, are you here to assist in my daring quest for justice?" "That depends," I said. "Does justice involve smuggling puppets across borders in cereal boxes?" He paused. "Only the good kind of smuggling, the cuddly kind." Turns out, Grover believed he was running a rescue mission. Said certain puppets were being denied proper nap time, and it was his sworn duty to intervene. His logic was loose. He claimed his flight routes were authorized by the United Nations of Fuzz. His permits were written in crayon. His parachutes were made of discarded alphabet mats. But the deeper I looked, the stranger it got. Some of those puppets weren't innocent. One sock had embezzled from a felt-based hedge fund. Another had a rap sheet involving glue theft and yarn fraud. Grover, whether he knew it or not, was moving high-profile fugitives disguised as bedtime pals. I followed the trail. It led to train yards in Quebec, storage lockers in Lisbon, even a foam-based nightclub in Rio, where all the drinks came with googly eyes. Everywhere I went, there was a whisper. Grover was here, sometimes helping, sometimes hindering, always airborne. He had a getaway vehicle, kind of. 2 soup cans strapped to a moped, retrofitted with glitter and blind hope. He called it the Super Swooper. I watched him test it once. He got 10 feet in the air, screamed justice, then hit a tree. We brought him in for questioning. He asked if the interrogation room had a theme song. I told him no. He hummed one anyway. When asked about the smugglers, he clammed up, said it was classified. We showed him photos, crates, ledgers, sock puppets in zip ties. He wept. "Those poor cuddly souls," he said. "They just wanted freedom and tickles." His lawyer arrived, a pink flamingo with glasses, claimed Grover was a whistleblower, claimed he had diplomatic immunity from the Republic of Plushistan. I checked. Plushistan wasn't real, but his alibi, rock solid. He had receipts, literal ones, showing purchases from international airports that lined up with every accusation. The timing didn't make sense, unless someone was using Grover as a decoy. I went back through the footage, grainy, shaky, and all of it featured Grover flailing through the sky at inopportune angles. But in the backgrounds, always the backgrounds, a different figure moved quietly, carrying boxes, unlocking gates, walking with purpose, while Grover distracted everyone with chaos. Grover wasn't the smuggler. He was the smokescreen. The real mastermind hadn't shown their face, not yet, but they had used Grover's antics as cover for something bigger. Puppet laundering on a global scale. I released him, gave him a pat on the cape, and warned him not to fly near windmills anymore. He saluted, then got stuck in the exit door. I don't know if Grover will ever stop trying to save the world, and maybe that's okay. But if there's one thing I've learned, sometimes the loudest hero isn't the one doing the saving. Sometimes they're just the distraction. And behind them, a darker hand pulling the strings. Time to find out who it is. Chapter 9. Snuffy's Witness Protection. There are bad witnesses, and then there's Mr. Snuffle-Uppergus. He's not just unreliable, he's barely real. When I first got the call, I thought it was a prank. You're needed for a mammoth. A mammoth? Yes. A 6-foot-tall, wool-covered, imaginary mammoth who may or may not be the key to unraveling an entire puppet syndicate. He lived in a bungalow behind Hooper's store. Real cozy setup, beaded curtains, lava lamp. The whole place smelled like peanut butter and denial. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again. The floor creaked. Then slowly he emerged. Long lashes, droopy eyes. That deep, slow voice like molasses melting over a radiator. "Oh, hello, detective," he said. "I was just in the middle of remembering something I forgot to remember." This was going to be a long interview. We brought him in under protective custody, or rather, we tried to. Turns out, you can't protect someone who keeps wandering off mid-sentence. Snuffy wasn't scared. He wasn't even aware. Half the time, he spoke in riddles. The other half, he talked about that time Big Bird saw a UFO. He told us he saw something important, something big. But every time we pressed for details, he got distracted by a dust mote, a sneeze, or a memory of a cookie. He mentioned a meeting behind the trash cans, said it involved Oscar, a sock puppet in sunglasses, and a briefcase full of googly eyes. Promising lead. But when I asked him when it happened, he said, right after the Great Spaghetti Parade. That's not a date. That's not even a time frame. That's a fever dream. I tried again. Asked for names, specifics, any detail we could use. "Well," he said slowly, "I think it was on a Tuesday or a Thursday, but not during nap time. I never miss nap time." The guy was a woolen maze of vague memories and gentle interruptions. But then he said something that froze me. "They were talking about the street," he whispered. "Not Sesame Street, the street, the one beneath it." That was new. According to Snuffy, there was an entire underground version of Sesame Street, secret tunnels, hidden hatches, a puppet black market for felt, feathers, and expired juice boxes. I didn't believe it until he handed me a map, hand-drawn, crayon and glitter, but weirdly accurate. It matched service blueprints we had on file. Access tunnels beneath the old set. Places even Oscar wouldn't go. We sent a team and found it. A hidden crawl space filled with crates marked education supplies. Inside, stuffed animals rigged with recording devices, empty lunchboxes with false bottoms, a ledger written in finger paint and paranoia. Snuffy wasn't lying. He was just remembering sideways. We brought him in again, this time with snacks. Trail mix seemed to help. He told us about the meeting of the four: Bert, Ernie, the Count, Oscar. He said they sat in a circle, passed around a rubber ducky like it was a talking stick. He couldn't recall what was said, only that there was tension and cake and maybe a goat. I asked him to testify. He agreed, then forgot, then agreed again. We enrolled him in witness protection, gave him a new name, Mr. Fluffle. Moved him to a safe house in New Jersey. He mistook it for a zoo. Next day, he wandered back to Sesame Street and asked Big Bird for directions to the courthouse. We tried again, put a tracking collar on him. He traded it for a sandwich. Eventually, we gave up on hiding him and focused on hiding around him. Stationed agents near his favorite nap spots, bugged his yarn pillow, cross-referenced everything he mumbled, and slowly, it paid off. We pieced together times, dates, locations, found cross-confirmation from traffic cams and old show tapings. Turns out Snuffy had a photographic memory. It was just badly organized, like a filing cabinet tossed down a flight of stairs. But in his confusion was truth. Honest, unpolished, sleepy-eyed truth. He remembered a secret code. One of these things is not like the others. He remembered a safe word: banana. And he remembered one last thing: Elmo never blinks. Which, as it turns out, is deeply disturbing. That was enough. We couldn't put Snuffy on the stand, but we could use what he gave us. He wasn't our star witness. He was our sleepy, slightly mythical breadcrumb trail. And that trail led somewhere bright red and eerily cheerful. It led to Elmo. Chapter 10. Elmo's Silence. Elmo never blinked. I noticed it the first time I interrogated him. Big round eyes, locked, unwavering. Like staring contests were a survival tactic. He sat there smiling, always smiling. Like he knew a joke you didn't. Like maybe the joke was you. Elmo understands, he said. Elmo wants to help. But the tone was off, too calm, too steady, like someone who'd rehearsed every word. We had him on suspicion of racketeering, but no direct evidence, just rumors, whispers, shredded napkins with red fuzz on them. I asked him where he was last Thursday. He tapped his chin, then sang. Thursday's for tickles, and Tuesday is too, but Friday's for secrets that don't involve you. I stared at him. He smiled wider. That a rhyme or a confession? I asked. Yes, he said. I leaned in. He leaned in. Then he giggled. It was a sound that did not belong in a police precinct. We checked his known associates. Half had relocated. The other half didn't remember anything. Literally nothing, like their memories had been scrubbed. We found a crayon drawing of Elmo holding hands with the Count over a pile of shredded banknotes. Next to them, a duck, wearing sunglasses. When we asked Ernie about it, he claimed the duck had diplomatic immunity. We checked. He wasn't wrong. Elmo had power, not loud power, not boss on a throne power, but whisper power, influence, smile and you do it power. Even the cookies changed when he walked by. I once saw Cookie Monster hand Elmo an entire snickerdoodle without a single word. Not even a nibble. That's not friendship. That's hierarchy. We kept surveillance on him. Saw him meet with Oscar at midnight. Exchange bags. One smelled like jelly beans. The other smelled like glue and ambition. Next day, Oscar bought a yacht. He parked it in a puddle. Still, it was a yacht. Elmo always spoke in rhymes, but never the same one twice, like a verbal fingerprint that couldn't be matched. We tried to track his speech patterns. The AI crashed twice. One linguist said it was like trying to decode a dream narrated by a doctor. Seuss fever ghost. But then came the breakthrough. We found the tapes, dozens of old VHS cassettes, all labeled with dates, some with titles like Nap Time Negotiations or The Great Alphabet Shakedown. On one, you see Elmo walk into Hooper's store, ask for a banana special, and the entire place empties out in silence. 4 minutes later, he walks out with a paper bag and a wink. We examined the bag. Inside, alphabet soup cans, all labeled Zed. We raided his residence. Nothing. Spotless. Sanitized. Like a showroom for innocence. Except for one thing. A notebook. Red cover. Smelled like glue and maple syrup. Inside riddles, maps, and a single phrase repeated over and over. Tickle me not. We brought him in again. This time, I played his own tape back for him. He giggled, said, Elmo loves reruns. I asked about the notebook. He looked serious, just for a moment, like the mask slipped. That book's not for you, he whispered. It's Elmo's prophecy. That was new. I asked what he meant. He stared at me, then softly recited, when letters melt and cookies fall, the red one smiles and rules them all. Then he laughed, and every bulb in the room flickered. Coincidence, right? Except the same thing happened the next 3 times he rhymed in that room. We considered exorcism. Instead, we tried hypnosis. Didn't work. Hypnotist ended up joining a puppet meditation retreat in Vermont. Elmo called it alignment. We tried again. Asked him point blank, was he running the operation? He paused, then stood, walked around the room, stopped by a mirror, looked into it. You ask questions Elmo can't answer, but answers you already know. Elmo's just a puppet. The hands are below. He walked out. No one stopped him. We had no grounds to hold him. Only stories, ink blots of suspicion. But every time someone asked me who was really in charge, I thought of that rhyme, of that smile. Elmo didn't run the street like a boss. He ran it like a nursery rhyme that never ended, a loop, a lullaby. And we all danced to the tune, in silence. Chapter 11. The Muppet Trial of the Century. The courthouse smelled like glue sticks and disappointment. The press called it the trial of the century. I called it Tuesday. 12 puppets, 1 jury, a judge who'd seen too much and blinked too little. I sat behind the prosecution table, flipping through files that read more like bedtime stories gone rogue. The defendants were a rainbow of felt and felony. Cookie Monster, charged with distribution of controlled baked goods. The Count, multiple counts of count fraud. Big Bird, extortion via birdsong. Bert, money laundering through avian trusts. Ernie, toy trafficking. Oscar, sanitation racketeering. Grover, unlicensed air travel. Elmo, no charges stuck. But he insisted on attending anyway. He said he wanted to watch the music happen. No one knew what that meant, but the judge allowed it. The courtroom sketch artist refused to draw him. Too many teeth in the smile, she said. Opening statements were chaos. The defense opened with a sing-along. The jury clapped. The judge cried. Prosecution presented a slideshow. Cookie Monster ate half the slides. We tried to play surveillance footage. Grover tried to fly into the projector. The screen shattered. Court adjourned early. Day 2. Testimonies. First up, Snuffy, sworn in, barely visible through the fog of his own nerves. Said he remembered everything. Then said he might have imagined it all. Then asked if the jury wanted to pet his ear. We dismissed him. Next, Prairie Dawn. Claimed she saw Bert passing manila envelopes to pigeons. Defense argued she was suffering from puppet paranoia. She wept into a tissue that turned out to be a subpoena. Big Bird took the stand voluntarily. He spoke in third person, then in French, then began singing the Fifth Amendment. We objected. The judge overruled, said it was a banger. Mid-trial, Ernie sold rubber ducks to the stenographer, cash only. Oscar refused to leave his trash can, so the court wheeled it into the witness box. Every answer came with a burp and a slur. We played wiretaps. One captured the count muttering. One offshore account, ah, ah, ah. 2 offshore accounts. Another caught Cookie Monster discussing import methods involving hollowed-out biscotti. When shown in court, Cookie Monster ate the evidence. We charged him with obstruction via snacking. Elmo just watched. Sometimes he hummed. The jury grew restless. They'd seen puppets sing, dance, threaten, cry. No one was sure what justice looked like anymore. One juror asked if they were still dreaming. Another tried to bribe me with graham crackers to make it end. Then came the final witness, Hooper. He wasn't supposed to be alive, but he walked in anyway, older, quieter, holding a receipt from 1974. Said he'd seen it all, said the street had changed, said Elmo once offered him a business deal so sweet it made his teeth fall out. Judge asked if it was true. Elmo smiled, then whispered, "That was Tuesday." We rested our case. The defense made closing arguments via interpretive dance. Big Bird wore a cape, Bert threw confetti, Ernie played the kazoo, Oscar just booed, then silence. The jury deliberated for 11 hours and one sing-along. They returned with a verdict, guilty of something, but they couldn't agree on what. The judge sighed, declared it a mistrial, said the case had become a metaphor. Everyone applauded, except me, because I knew it wasn't over. The network was still active. The song still played. The duck still squeaked. And Elmo just smiled, like he knew we'd all be back for the sequel. Chapter 12. Quiet Streets Again. Final Thoughts. The trial ended like a bad dream you can't quite shake. Puppets scattered. Reporters disappeared. The jury entered therapy. And me, I walked out of that courthouse with a folder full of unanswered questions and a stomach full of courtroom mints. Sesame Street looked the same. Same lamppost, same stoop, same smell of chalk, cookies, and conspiracy. But everything had changed. You can't unsee a black market duck ring. Can't forget the sound of Oscar negotiating a landfill merger through a banana phone. And you sure as heck can't ignore the fact that Elmo's been quietly buying property from 123 to the end of the block. Some say the street was always a little crooked. You just had to know where to look. Now I can't stop looking. I pass Cookie Monster's old cookie depot. It's boarded up, sure. But at night, if you listen close, you can still hear the soft rustle of snack wrappers and distant crunching. I saw Grover yesterday. Said he was going straight. Got a job delivering foam mattresses. Accidentally launched 3 into traffic. Progress. Oscar claims he's clean now. No more waste deals. Just compost seminars. His guest speaker last week was a ferret wearing a bow tie. Bert and Ernie, still roommates, still weird. Their financial records are encrypted in Morse code made of squeaks. The count's off the grid. Rumor is he's running a dice monastery in the Alps. And Elmo. Elmo hasn't spoken since the trial. Just hums. That same tune. It gets stuck in your head, like gum on the soul. I tried to quit. Filed retirement papers, bought a boat, tried fishing, but the boat sank, and the fish judged me. So I came back, not to arrest, not to punish, just to watch. Because the street doesn't end, it loops. Every time you think you've closed the case, another one opens. New puppet, new plot, new nap schedule. It's exhausting, but it's home. I still wear the badge, still keep my notes in a lunchbox labeled Justice Snacks, still listen for the whispers behind the playground, because somewhere beneath the felt and giggles, a new crime is brewing, and I'll be there, notebook in hand, trench coat flapping, one eye on the stoop, one on the song, because if Sesame Street taught me anything, it's that justice may sleep, but it never naps. Case closed, for now.